Good morning, everyone. It's Cameron of Venus Theory, and welcome back to another episode of Morning Coffee with Cameron. So while I was doing work this week, one of my clients asked me to create a set of bell sounds, and this is a pretty straightforward project. So after meeting with the client and talking things over, we decided that there are three basic categories of bell sounds. There's analog bells, FM bells, and real actual bells. So my job was to synthesize these sounds, record them, whatever, just make this set of sounds. So, creating analog bells and like retro synthwave bells is not really that hard. I can do that on just about anything. Creating FM bells, also a pretty straightforward job. Then it came to the actual physical bells, and that's where I ran into a bit of trouble. The problem being, while I could sit here and try and synthesize these, I don't really have a synth that's that great at it, and FM synthesis can get pretty close to really good sounding actual bells, but it's not quite there. Now, option B was for me to go out and record a bunch of actual physical bell sounds, but I ran into the small problem of not having any idea where to go to record a large variety of bell sounds. Then it popped back into my brain that there exists a type of synthesis that's specifically designed to do these types of things. Physical modeling synthesis, and that is what we are here to talk about today. So rather than sit around trying to find a bunch of bells and fight an FM synth trying to get a really good sounding bell sound, I decided, you know what, I'll just go buy a synth that does this. So the primary synth we're going to be using today is AAS Chromaphone 2. This is a really ridiculously powerful physical modeling synth, and it's pretty freaking cool. If you're interested in picking the synth up for yourself, I highly recommend it. It's 50% off at Plugin Boutique as of the time of recording this video, and it also came with a free copy of Isotope Iris 2, which I'm going to be doing a video on as well. So before we dive in and take a look at this synth and all that, I just wanted to talk a little bit about physical modeling synthesis, what it is, and a little bit about how it works. So when we break down the conventional types of synthesis, there's subtractive synths, FM synths, there's granular, there's additive, and then physical modeling. There's also like waveguide synthesis and wavetable synthesis and all that, but there's just these kind of core categories, and physical modeling is a pretty cool one, I think. So when you have stuff like an analog synth or an FM synth or whatever, like I said at the beginning of this video, there's a variety of sounds you can create with these, and they're very good at what they do. However, when it comes to creating realistic sounds, they aren't really all that good at it because real sounds are actually pretty complicated. Now, when it comes to something like a bell isn't really the most complicated sound on earth. Like I said, you can get pretty close with an FM synthesizer. But when it comes to things like drums or marimbas or other things like that have different physical and acoustic properties, it's very difficult to do this with a conventional synthesizer. And that's where physical modeling synthesis steps in. So physical modeling synthesis actually works by being based around mathematical models of a thing. So if we break this down, let's think of a drum, for example. The things we're going to have to model are the actual head of the drum, the skin of the drum, and the cavity of the drum. And this opens up a world of possibilities because we can also combine things in weird ways to create sounds that don't really exist. And that's why I think Chromaphone 2 is such an interesting synth and why I was really happy that I picked it up. So in case you didn't already know, AAS, or Applied Acoustics Systems, is also responsible for creating collision in Ableton, and that's basically what Chromaphone 2 is. It's kind of like the, I suppose in a way, more developed and bigger brother of collision. It's pretty cool stuff. And physical modeling synthesis also isn't only good for drums and marimbas and bells and stuff. There's a whole giant variety of different physical modeling synths out there. AAS also has the object delay, which is like a delay filtering plugin, I guess. It seems really cool. Basically, it allows you to kind of add physical modeling characteristics to any sound. And then there's companies like Arturia who have their own proprietary engine thing. I don't really understand all the math and stuff, but that's, I think, a pretty large part of why the V collection sounds as good as it does. And they also used it for Piano V, which is a really decent sounding physically modeled piano. Outside of that, there's software like Pianotech, which has been in development for years and years and has one of the best sounding physical modeling pianos I've ever heard, and I really hope to get a hold of it someday. There's companies like IK Multimedia who have Modo, which is a string synthesizer, and they're also working on a new Modo drum synth thing that looks really cool. There's also the Archie or Ark, something like that. I'm not really sure how to say it, by Expressive E, which is a suite of 3 physically modeled string instruments. Really fantastic sounding cello too. You should pause this and check out the demos for it. It does look really cool. There's also Swam S or Swam S by Audio Modeling, and that's based around digital waveguide synthesis, something like that. pretty cool sounding, I think. And there's stuff like Reactor Prism, which is also based around physical modeling or modal synthesis. I guess both kind of go hand in hand to some extent. So anyways, let's go ahead and dive into it here and play around with Chromaphone 2, talk a little bit about physical modeling, and just show off some experiments and kind of fun things to do with it. So let's dive in and get started. Alright, so here we are with Chromaphone 2, and I'm just going to go ahead and play a couple of sounds and then we'll dive into the nitty-gritty details about physical modeling and stuff. So pretty cool stuff. Let's try like a kick drum. How about a random snare? Let's try a different snare. Pretty cool stuff. How about some cymbals? Nice. Chimes and bells. Keys. How about organs and stuff? Strings and pads. Effects. Percussion. So on and so on. It's pretty cool stuff. Okay, so when it comes to physical modeling, this is basically how it works. We define a set of parameters and the synth spits out a sound that sounds pretty realistic. So in Chromaphone, this is actually pretty easy. So if we wanted to make something like, let's just say, yeah, like a marimba sound, okay? We could have two resonators and yeah, just that should work. Just a marimba and a closed tube. Cool, and then we could adjust different parameters and stuff, like the mallet. Make the mallet more stiff. Noise. And add some noise here, I guess. Let's get rid of that sustain. Yeah, we'll add some attack. Let's maybe mess with the decay. And the material. And the position we're hitting it. We could change the setting here, which I believe is like how many partials it adds. So you can see that the applications of this are pretty broad. You can do a lot of stuff, and you know, instead of having to have like gigabytes and gigabytes of samples, this is all just math. And like I said, just it's a equation, and it makes it a lot easier on your computer rather than having to, you know, load gigs and gigs and gigs of samples onto your RAM and then choking your entire workstation down because you've got, you know, 14 different instruments going in a track. It's really, really cool stuff. Beyond that, the other thing is you can make it a lot more expressive. And, you know, with samples, that's kind of one of the inherent downsides is, you know, when it's a sampled instrument, there's only so many samples to go through. And you can get around this to some degree by having a really extensive library at the cost of having a much larger library to download and use and install. So, you know, when you want multiple versions of something, you could have random robin, or, you know, on like a drum, for example, you could have 15 different velocities, and then each of those velocity layers has 3 different versions that it will cycle between to create a more realistic performance. And you know, while that's really cool, it's kind of a pain in the ass. And I'm sure you guys have dealt with that too, where it's like, you know, like me personally, before I really got like Piano V and other stuff, it's like I had piano libraries that, I mean, God, they're just huge. I mean, they were 20 fucking gigabytes. It's ridiculous. And then like string libraries too. I have session strings and another one from Native Instruments. I mean, it's like 60 gigabytes. It's ridiculous. And you know, especially in some sessions where like I want to use a couple instances of it, And like, I have a pretty powerful computer and it'll start to get bogged down just because I'm having to pull so many samples all the time. But once we get into stuff like physical modeling, it gets around that, and it's not very CPU intensive at all. And especially, in this day and age, as computers are a lot more powerful, like I think anyone could run this and have, 20 instances of it, and your computer wouldn't even break a sweat. But like I was saying, with physical modeling, the other thing is you can increase the expressiveness of something. So right now, this sound, let's go ahead and get rid of that attack and noise and just kind of go back to like a standard mallet sound. So right now, it's not really all that expressive. It's kind of just one sound over and over. But, if we change different velocities here, so let's adjust the decay over the key range. The hit position is going to tie to velocity. Material here, we could use that. We'll change the velocity here, a little bit of key tracking. And then the stiffness, we can also tie that to velocity. We'll do noise to velocity and key range. So now I'm going to get a lot more variety. Pretty cool stuff. And, this is kind of the very, very basics of physical modeling. So we could maybe add a adjustment to the balance with key tracking. And we end up getting a pretty expressive instrument, and I think it's kind of cool. But the really neat stuff with physical modeling is jumping into stuff that doesn't really exist. So right now we have a pretty standard sound. We have a marimba or some kind of metal bar based on the material knob, and we have a closed tube. You can think of this like a drum shell. So, like that's kind of a pretty standard thing. But what if we had let's say a open tube that vibrates into or onto a plate? There's not really an instrument like that, and we've kind of now created an entirely new sound, and it's pretty cool. So we could adjust like the radius here. Okay, let's maybe make this like a metal plate. Or maybe a duller material. Adjust the pitch. And we get some really cool and kind of weird stuff. We could just add some like basic effects. Let's just add like a nice big old reverb. So, if you wanted to make like a generic like tropical house track now, something like that, you can create really cool pluck things here. We could change this into like a string onto an open tube. Why not? And just, adjust these different parameters a bit more. And let's do something like that. Sure. Make this relatively stiff. Mallet, noise, color. All right, and let's see what we got. Let's go down to a really low octave. Almost a weird bass. And then, up here, we get almost like a weird harpsichord, and we could uncouple these things. So in the case of Chromaphone, coupling is tying these two objects together that one is going to transfer energy into another. So that way, you can kind of get some variety by coupling or not coupling these things, or as you saw earlier, adjusting the key tracking to the balance, and that would change the way the coupled objects work. But in this case, the two aren't related at all. So, you can get some really weird, interesting sounds. So beyond that, there's Piano V, which I've talked about a little bit. Pretty cool piano. And I use this piano all the time in my own music now. And that's one of the really cool things about Piano V and physical modeling pianos is, like I said previously, like the piano libraries I have are gigantic. And, like usually you're only going to use like one piano in a track. There's a couple cases where I've had two separate pianos, but, besides the point. The point being is, what would take 20 gigabytes of samples to, create different types of pianos or, something that has like a really soft piano sound and, like the lid is closed and then the lid is open again, and things like that. Like this would take so many samples, but this allows me to do this instantly. And then change other characteristics like where were the microphones. And, you can't really do that with a sample library outside of just blending between samples. So, you could like crossfade between one set of samples and the other set of samples to kind of replicate different microphone setups, but it's not really going to be, truly accurate as physical modeling aims to do. And that's the really cool thing about it is, we're creating new environments for sound to propagate in nearly instantaneously. Like I can change almost all of these settings in real time and instantly hear the result, which is just incredibly powerful. And, like if we threw this in a half decent reverb, we can get up reverence here. And yeah, just throw this in like a nice studio reverb. Really, really nice piano sound, and stuff like Piano Tech sounds even better. And then just one other example I guess I wanted to show is just Carplus Strong string synthesis. This is a really basic thing you can do yourself if you have Voltage Modular or other modular software, or I don't know, anything that really allows you to do a comb filter and key track it really. Or you can just do it with a regular old comb filter as long as you can crank the old resonance knob pretty high. So this is Carplus Strong, which is a very primitive physical modeling thing. So what I'm using is noise, and I'm feeding it into an envelope here, or feeding it into this comb filter, but it's going to this amplifier, which is controlled by this envelope. And this envelope has a decay time of like, let's say 0.2 milliseconds. And it's very, very short, but by creating a really, really, really resonant comb filter, out pops a string sound, which is kind of cool. And we could adjust the resonance to adjust the decay. And then, we could feed this noise through different filters to get different results. So right now, this is like a really resonant low pass filter. Or we could feed this through this band pass filter and like make it a super, super narrow band pass. And yeah, that's a really, really easy physical modeling experiment. And you could just adjust things like the envelope here. Envelope. So we could, adjust the band pass. We could invert the comb filter. We could have multiple comb filters. You could do a whole bunch of different things. So beyond that, I just wanted to talk about some of the other companies that are doing physical modeling stuff, just so you guys can check them out and perhaps pick up some of these plugins for yourself if this is something you're interested in. So this is the Object Delay by AAS, or Applied Acoustic Systems. There's a 50% off summer sale right now. I might pick this one up. I'm not sure, but this, like I said, is like a delay / filter thing that allows you to add physical modeling characteristics to just about any sound, which is I think pretty interesting, and it'd be cool to, be able to throw a sound through a drum head or some of the other models that are included with Chromaphone. These guys also make Strum GS2, which is acoustic and electric guitars, and they also have the String Studio, which is a string instrument synthesizer, which is pretty cool. Obviously, there is Piano Tech, which is a piano physical modeling synth, and this is probably one of the most comprehensive physical modeling synths out there. This allows you to adjust pretty much every single parameter of a piano that's possible, and I have no idea how they did what they did. It sounds so good, and to be able to change that many parameters of a piano is like absolutely ridiculous. If you haven't seen it, Ben and Gear, that channel, has a great video on Piano Tech I recommend you check out. After that, we have the Archie, I don't know, Touche, so Arche? This is by Expressive E, and this is one that I think is pretty cool. Let me actually play the cello sound here, because like I don't know, I think this sounds it sounds really, really cool. And these guys also have this new controller here, the Touche, which is like a way to play a string instrument. It's like a specialized MIDI controller, basically. You can check out a video on it. It's kind of cool. Outside of that, one of the better guitar physical modeling synths, I think, is this one here. It's called Iron Axe from Zune Audio. I don't really know how to pronounce that. I'll just play a quick demo here. Another one here. I guess not. But yeah, no, this is a really, really cool guitar physical modeling thing. If you're wanting to add guitar sounds to your mixes, definitely check this out if you don't know how to play guitar or don't, have a good amp or a way to record your guitar or whatever. This one is really, really cool. Next up, IK Multimedia has Modo. These are pretty neat. This is a physically modeled bass. Not really something I would play with, but like if you're maybe a guitarist and want to add bass to your tracks and don't have a bass around, it's a really good sounding bass engine. It's kind of cool. This is the one I'm excited about from them, though, is Modo Drum. You can pre-order this right now. I didn't really know we could like pre-order VSTs, but apparently that's becoming a thing. This is physically modeling drum virtual instrument, blah, 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 blah. This is the sales page. I am a little bit excited for this. I'm actually pretty excited for this. I think this sounds absolutely fantastic and lets you adjust a pretty comprehensive range of controls for the drums. So I think this is going to be really, really cool, and I might have to reach out to them to try this out when it is released. After that, Swam Cello. This is audio modeling. They have woodwinds and strings. So we've got kind of all your classic string sounds. And then in the woodwinds, we've got, what do we got? Clarinet, saxophone, flute, double reeds. This is also a very, very, very good sounding string engine. I'll play a little segment of this. So I think that one sounds fantastic as well. And, that is basically physical modeling in a nutshell. I think it's kind of cool stuff, and excited to see where it goes in the future. Because like I said, I think this, along with additive synths and stuff like that, is really going to represent the future of VSTs, and, sample libraries are probably kind of on the way out. And that's it for this video, guys. So thanks for watching. I hope you learned something. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys again soon.